Stress is like the kryptonite for sleep.
People assume is that they have bad sleep hygiene, right? But yet it's actually something else in their life. What can they try to sleep better that has not been talked about and Googled?
If you don't connect your bed with a place of peace and restfulness, it doesn't matter how perfect your routine is.
Magnesium versus melatonin for sleep.
I love magnesium. I've never actually had one of these.
You
I
have
see
it?
them everywhere.
They're okay. Well, first of all, the reason why I like them is the ingredients. You're actually on. This is a video. No, and that's not why I like them. I like them because number one, they taste good, but that's not even why. I like the
They do
ingredients.
taste good because they look like they would taste bad.
And that's why. First of all,
It reminds me of a ginger shot.
let me tell you something. The competition to these things tastes like shit. This actually tastes delicious, and the ingredients are like top shelf and all great for. They're all like adaptogens, neurotropics.
Yeah,
It's
it looks
actually
good.
very good.
Everything in it looks good.
There's a reason why they're like probably the number one
Who's their biggest
mental
competition?
performance shot. I think ketone IQ is probably their biggest
I
competition.
mean, that tastes, well, their new one with caffeine tastes way better.
Yeah, but it's like rocket fuel. It tastes terrible.
You know what's crazy is the original was 10 times worse.
Oh, I know. This tastes much better.
The
This tastes
original
much
was
better.
like unbearable.
Yeah, I know. By the way, this is going to be on the podcast. Are
Really?
you okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine. No, I mean, I remember I was one of the first 500 people to try the first one. And I couldn't even you had to amp yourself up.
I know. And that's why, like, for me, I like something that will actually be part of my day-to-day life, right? Like, if I have to, brace myself to take something, it's probably not the
Yeah.
best idea. But something like this, I think, actually tastes really good, and it does keep you focused. So I actually been doing these every time I do a podcast, like right before. And when I give it to somebody, I ask them honestly, I'm like, tell me the truth. Like, do you actually feel more focused? I ask them off camera, not so they're
Yeah.
on the spot. And they're like, actually, I really like them. Can you send me more? Or can I have a few to take with me or whatever? And that's like a true tail sign. In my
I think
opinion.
taste is, people don't think about taste, but I do feel like if you look forward to taking something, your compliance is much higher. Like gummies, I feel like gummies have taken off in all forms just because everybody looks forward to a gummy.
Yeah, it's 100%
So it's
why.
like, even if it's, or it's more expensive or whatever, it's like if you take it every day, there's a value in just being consistent.
Well, there's a lot of research into data that actually points to if something doesn't taste good, doesn't matter how good it is for you, if it tastes like shit, you're not going to do it
For sure.
long term or consistently.
I'm guilty of that.
Yeah, I am too. That's why
Or convenient.
or convenient. Well, convenient for sure.
I like little things.
Little shots. Okay, wait a second. Can you please take a video? I know that. Can you take a video of this as well? Because just why not? Why the hell not? You could take it with my phone if you want. Yeah. And take it a little closer.
Are you not with Ketone IQ anymore?
Do you know you're on camera?
Well, I mean, I figured it'd be cropped, wouldn't it?
No.
You're not going to have him taking a video.
No.
Oh.
I mean, okay, can you start again? Yeah. And you're on my podcast video. This is recording.
Well, I figured it'd be cropped, but hey, whatever works.
Listen,
I have nothing to hide. I got nothing to hide.
I don't want to put you in a compromising position. Okay. What we do here, we shake it up, boom, boom, boom. This is Magic Mind. It is great for not just for your focus and for your brain, but it's just great for energy. And it tastes good. Don't worry. I would never feed you something.
That's my first time I've ever actually had this. I've seen it a million times.
He's a virgin. Get Todd. I've done this before.
Oh, that's much better than it looks. It does. It's like green, so you think it's going to be nasty, but it's pretty good. It's kind of like peach.
Yeah, it's delicious.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it's delicious. My husband's obsessed with them. They also make you. It kind of actually sharpens just your overall. It makes you a little more alert.
I need that. I need all the help I can get.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be a long ass podcast, so I wanted to at least give you something to get you, primed and ready.
Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
We did talk to each other for 2 hours during Hell on the Hill that one time.
We did. That's how we became friends, actually.
Yeah.
We became fast friends.
Suffered.
We became friends through suffering. You know why you were suffering? Because you had a knee problem.
Knee surgery.
A knee surgery.
A knee surgery 2 weeks before that.
Yeah. We talked, by the way, not to correct you, it wasn't 2 hours. We talked for 5 hours. That thing was
because it's, at one point you tried to make it, remember? So
Oh,
then I couldn't do that.
That's true. No, I think what happened, we spoke for like 40 minutes and then I kind of went on my merry way. I came back to you for 2
You were
hours.
kind of like Bambi at the end, like your legs were all
Do,
jello-y.
do you remember?
Oh yeah, I remember.
I totally, that was actually, because I was like, if I came all the way here, I didn't come this far to come this far. So I was like,
You're gonna throw a Jesse quote in there,
by the way, that's not a Jesse quote. That's an everybody
but
quote.
he says that all the time.
So just because he says it, he says a lot of things that other people have said prior. But yes, we're both friends with Jesse Itzler, and he does say that a lot. I didn't come this far to only come this far, but I actually say that too.
That's in his home gym.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that because I say that all the time. Yep. There you go. Thank you so much. I do like that saying, and I do say that
That's
quite
good.
often.
It's like it's pretty deep if you really think about it.
Well, it's very true.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Well, maybe not. Depends who you are.
Exactly. I guess it depends who you are. However, this is, I think I was telling Todd before we started, Todd is very likable. You have a very likable quality. He makes friends very easily. You're like, you go with the flow. You're easygoing. We became friends
I appreciate that.
very quickly. No, you're welcome. We became friends very quickly. I thought I was special. Quickly did I learn
You're special.
that I'm not. No, that you do that with everybody. And so that's okay. But
I
I
do
think
not talk to people for 3 hours on a hill.
that's
That's not true. There was a lot of other people there.
there was a lot of people, but it was kind of like you were kind of stumbling around and people were very, very driven to get it done.
Yeah, we were.
And we were just lollygagging
We were more
and
there
having
for
fun.
the experience.
Yeah, for the experience, the hell on the hill experience. By the way, Todd, what do I call you besides my dear friend? What do we say? You're a sleep expert, a recovery expert?
Recovery. I'm all things recovery. I'm obsessed with anything that makes you feel better.
And so, by the way, I didn't even bring up. So Todd Anderson's on the podcast, just FYI. Not only is he my friend, he also is actually, he started a new company called Dream Recovery, which is sleep tape. You tape your mouth. He's all about, like I said, recovery, sleep. And what I like about you, and I think why you're doing well, Todd's really crushing it right now. You really are.
Fine.
Is because you are good at taking information and like explaining it in layman's terms that people can really digest and understand.
Probably because that's how I need to be explained.
Well, it works, right? Like
Yeah.
your content is very simple, like it's very easily digestible.
Yeah.
And so I'm very proud of you.
Appreciate it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. So let's start. So if you're like sleep is what you've been focusing on, do you want to kind of give let's start basic. Why is sleep so important?
Well, it's the only aspect of health and wellness that I think pours into all the other buckets, right? So if you think about like nutrition, exercise, even mental health, sleep has a huge impact on every single thing. The other ones I think can almost live in a silo where it takes time for them to affect the others. Sleep is almost the foundation of all. So I would say people put like sleep, exercise, nutrition, these are all the buckets of health, wellness, longevity. And I would argue that sleep is almost like the foundation because it doesn't matter how good you're doing at those other things. If you're not sleeping well, it will all crumble down.
Yeah.
And it's really the only one that's like that. There's a lot of ways to eat. There's a lot of ways to work out. There's a lot of different ways to manipulate these different variables. But sleep is the one that's very consistent and almost,
it's
true.
true.
Across the board, everyone has the same needs. Like it's very consistent across everybody, which is rare because like there's so much variety in every other bucket.
You know what? I agree, obviously, because if you don't sleep well, everything else kind of falls to the wayside, right? Like your mood, you get like everything, the way you eat, you're unable to focus, you can't work. You know what's interesting? Only recently has sleep become a phenomenon in terms of having recognition as the importance it should have had, right? Like 20 years ago, no one really talked about it. 10 years ago, no one talked about it.
I started speaking on sleep like probably 6 or 7 years ago, mostly in New York, and companies would ask me, okay, how long is your presentation?
Yeah.
And they're like 15 minutes. And I'm like, it's an hour. They're like, how do you talk an hour on sleep? Like there was no interest, like nobody was even concerned. But it was cool because at that time when I was talking about it, a lot of the stuff that's so mainstream now, people kind of, their minds were blown because no one had ever spoken about caffeine, alcohol. Like people didn't even know like why any of this stuff affected your sleep.
Impacted it.
Yeah, and what was the outcome? So that's what really like motivated me to dive all in on sleep, because it was cool that the information wasn't really out there. And then when someone changed their sleep habits, the impact of their quality of life was exponential. And there's not really anything else you can do that will have that big of an impact. If someone goes from sleeping 5 hours to 8, they're like a different person. They literally are a different person. Their brain works in a whole different way.
No, that's why they even say like if something is happening in your life that's exceptionally stressful or emotionally charged, you always hear people say, or you hear like, let me sleep on it before I respond, or do the X or Y, because that will make a major impact on what your decisions are.
You know what's crazy about that? Like there's so much truth to that. And I don't even know why people, when they used to say it, they knew what they were saying. But when we sleep, a lot of our memory is consolidated. And the one thing that's not consolidated, the thing that we don't hold on to as far as memory goes, is the magnitude of emotion. So like if you're very emotional, like you'll remember every single detail about an argument, the facts, why, what you were saying, but we tend to not remember how amplified our emotion was. Like you almost forget. It becomes more of like a logical memory. So if you're ever in like a huge fight and you sleep on it, you'll actually have like a clear outlook on that argument. And a lot of times you realize like you were just really worked up and emotional. And when you write this all out on paper, it wasn't worth getting worked up for.
Right. And also I guess what are you saying also that how we react in the first place is more emotional.
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
Because of the lack of sleep.
Right.
Right?
Well, yeah. And then naturally, I think a lot of arguments take place later in the day, especially with couples. Mm-hmm. And our anxiety naturally ramps up throughout the day. That's just how our brain works, and it needs to reset when we go to sleep. So like I tell people, like, you actually should go to bed angry. If you get in a huge fight, you're better off just go to bed, reset, wake up, talk through it, because you won't be as emotional about it in the morning. Like just scientifically, you literally will not store the amount of emotion that you felt the previous day.
That is so true. And I think that this whole idea, that concept should be like flipped on its head like you just did. Like, like never go to bed angry. Actually, you're right. You should go to bed angry because your response and how you react and the dynamic will be so much better if you actually slept well.
Yeah.
But how do you fall asleep when you're angry and stressed? Like it's hard to fall asleep.
That's true. I mean, that would be the argument for the other side of it. But
can you fall asleep when you're like super angry and
I probably
pissed?
could. I mean,
you're probably like
me and my
snoring.
wife are pretty like I guess resilient when it comes to falling asleep. So we probably could, but I think a lot of people might have to work it out, or at least get to a point where you agree that you're going to talk about it the next day. I think you have to be on the same page, but.
I agree. What was I know your background, but why don't you tell people a little bit about your background, to where you came, like where you kind of started from to become someone who's such a renowned sleep expert now?
Yeah, I mean, so, I played football. I was at Michigan State with the Rams for a little bit, but throughout that, I was always obsessed with human performance. I mean, it really started like I was an overweight kid, and I think I just wanted to be in shape. Like I used to dread pool parties. Like I would make up excuses prior to summer to like not go to pool parties if someone's birthday. I hated it. Yeah. So I became kind of obsessed with I started working out, and I realized I could get myself in pretty good shape. Kind of became obsessed with human performance, but then I was just fascinated by.
How old were you when that was happening?
That was like middle school.
Okay.
Yeah. So then high school, started working out, getting in really good shape. By the time I was a senior, I was in like awesome shape and was just obsessed with it. I loved learning, and back then it was like reading Muscle and Fitness, and like that was the only resources out there. And that kind of continued, and I thought I wanted to be like a college strength conditioning coach. So even in college with football, I was always more concerned about the performance side than even like the playbook. It was just more interesting to me. And so when I got done playing football, I wanted to go into strength conditioning, went back and worked for a facility that trained like a bunch of pro athletes, and then started training people on my own, went to Miami, and started working with Equinox and being a manager, and then overseeing different areas. And through that time, I got to spend a bunch of time with Dr. Jennifer Martin, who's at UCLA. She's one of the top sleep psychologists. And that just sparked my interest. Like as soon as I started diving into this stuff, way before anyone else was really talking about it, like a light bulb went off, and I realized this was a huge gap. People don't know about any of this stuff, but it's one of the most important things we can do. And so, I tried to learn as much as I could, took as many courses that were available, which it was tough at the time. And then, I started speaking to like sports teams and companies and really connecting the dots between the science and the goals people are trying to achieve, like almost like the liaison. Athletes are told all the time, like, sleep's good for you, but they're never told why it's good for you in relation to the sport they're playing. So really trying to relate. And even like, I spoke at the New York Bar Association, like their lifestyle is insane. They're working 18-hour days, entertaining clients like nuts. But, you have to speak to them in a way that they're going to realize, how much more efficient they are if they sleep and how it's going to make them more money and save them time. And so I just became super passionate about it. And through speaking, that's kind of how the Dream Recovery was born, is I would get asked about products. What do I use? What are some tools? And I never had awesome answers. And I met my partners, and it was like kind of just perfect timing. It all kind of came together. So it was a need. Like I got asked all the time, and I would be like, well, there's some stuff on Amazon, but it's not the best. And all of a sudden it just all lined up.
So, I mean, I find this interesting because there is, like we said in the beginning, the correlation between sleep and weight gain, the correlation between productivity and sleep is so high, right?
Yeah.
And it always comes down to like, okay, well, how do I sleep? There are people who, no matter what they do, they can't seem to be good sleepers. And then you hear the same adage, okay, well, sleep in a dark room, in a cold room, do all these things, right? Like consistency, like have like a routine. Can you talk about some things that people who are listening, what can they try to sleep better that has not been talked about and Googled at nauseum that may be like something that they didn't even think to even try?
I think this is a huge miss in the space, and everyone focuses on all the things you just said. None of that matters if your mindset isn't right surrounding sleep. Mm-hmm. So if you don't connect your bed with a place of peace and restfulness, it doesn't matter how perfect your routine is, your mind will take over every single time. So as soon as you're battling with sleep, you're thinking about not being able to sleep, nobody has stressed their way to sleeping better, right? So when you start stressing and not being able to sleep and you're sitting in bed and laying there awake, you start associating your bed with that feeling. And our brain is really good with linking places and feelings and sense in different spaces with emotion. And so if you start feeling unsettled and anxious because you can't sleep, your body is going to start being like, oh, this is the bed. This is the place where I feel uneasy and I can't fall asleep. And every time you get into bed, you're going to have that feeling. So I think, taking a step back and being like, how do I create the most peaceful space and keeping that a sacred place? Like for two things, sleep and one other thing.
What's the other thing,
your
Todd?
friend has a whole podcast about it.
Oh,
Emily can talk about that.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, so either sex or sleep.
That's it. And that you also have to connect the feelings surrounding those things. So it's not just I go to sleep. It's I actually sleep. And as soon as you start feeling anxious, having thoughts about not being able to sleep and beat yourself up, get up and get out of that space. That's a sacred space. It has to be peaceful. You should look forward to going to that space. And as soon as you start having thoughts beyond that, like you need to exit and kind of reframe.
So, I don't have a TV in my room because, but what happened is I would watch TV and it would keep me up for another 45 minutes, an hour minimum. Do you feel like that's something that, like, how do you kind of recondition people not to have that as a place where they...
So this is interesting. So there's been some cool stuff to come out on this, but I totally break the rules on this. I have a TV in my room, and I watch TV with my wife every single night before bed. But I'll tell you why, because we've done that for 10 years. We watch a show every single night.
What show?
Just depends on what we're watching. But that's like our sacred time. It almost feels like everything's right in the world during those 30 minutes, right? And I would not trade that for whatever impact the light or having a TV is in my room. So I think something to point out is, with all these sleep, health, wellness hacks, relationships and how powerful and deep your relationships are by far the most accurate predictor of longevity. So if optimizing your health is interfering with having deep relationships with friends and family, you need to reassess your priorities because you think you're being healthy, but you're actually not because you're not allowed. There's times when staying up till 1 a.m. is probably worth it. So I think
I'm so glad that you said that. I'm a huge believer in that too. I think that it's gotten out of hand, quite frankly,
Yeah.
on like what people are doing. Like they track everything. Everything has to be monitored, where that in itself becomes such a stressful endeavor,
Yeah.
where that has to be impacted on what you're doing. Like,
for sure.
what do you feel about tracking, like sleep trackers
Yeah.
and sleep? Does it actually make your sleep worse because
Yeah.
you're like up on edge, like, oh my God, am I
So-
sleeping okay?
So there's been an outbreak of what we call like an orthosomniac, which is like ortho coming from the Greek word of like fixing, like an orthopedic surgeon, they fix things. So
Yeah.
orthosomniac is being obsessed with fixing your sleep. And I think with all this data and tracking, it's brought this wave of people that almost try to make they treat their sleep like running a marathon. Like I can get faster and faster and better and better and better. And that's not really how to approach sleep, right? Like sleep is this thing where like if it's really good and things are going great, that's it. Like you can't continue to press on and lower your pace, right? That's not how it goes. And I think there's an obsession with this because all of a sudden we have this big influx of data of like, okay, sleep is really impactful to our health. It's very important. And then so all of a sudden people are like, well, how do I get the best sleep ever? And that's just not how it works. It's almost like a yes or no type thing. Do you have great sleep? Yes. Okay, move on. Let's not think about it anymore because the more you focus on it, usually the worse your sleep gets. So I love sleep trackers, but not in the traditional sense. I wear a Whoop. I have for, 7 years, I think. But what I do is honestly don't even look at it to the day to day. I look at the monthly recaps. You can look at the yearly recaps, look at big life changes. Maybe you made a change in your routine or you added in like a sauna, something like that. And you can see on the macro level, like how did something impact my sleep? But there's no reason to wake up, stress out about what that number is going to be. And then let this number that comes from this piece of technology dictate how you feel, right? You could feel awesome, wake up, that number says 19% recovery, and you convince yourself that you don't feel good. And that doesn't make sense.
Well, right. Also, like, how accurate is technology?
Yeah.
It's not 100% perfect.
It's getting better and better, but yeah, like I get questions all the time, like, I had this percent of REM sleep and this percent of deep sleep, and I'm like, listen, first off, those are very hard to measure, especially at home with a wrist-based tracker. Second off, if you feel good and you're getting the optimal amount of sleep and you have a consistent bedtime and wake time, why are you worrying about this?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, listen, I used to do I used to do all of it, right? I used to wear the Aura ring and the Whoop
Yep.
and the this and eventually I'm like, you know what? Screw that, because like I know how I feel when I wake up and
Right.
if I'm sleeping well. For me to drive myself nuts and create like more stress and anxiety over looking at the data of this and that, like you can't biohack yourself into happiness.
No.
You can't.
Nope.
You can biohack yourself into craziness, but you can't biohack yourself into happiness.
No.
And the more you try to like biohack your life, I believe that it actually is more destructive than good, right?
agree.
Like in everything. Like people don't like it becomes like if you're doing something good, it's not good enough. You have to make it more precise
Right.
and more better.
And sleep's not like that, though,
I
right?
know.
It's like if it's good, and walk away. Like leave it alone.
100%. You know what happens to me, and I'm sure everybody can relate, and I'm sure you do this too. Like once I start not thinking I'll be able to fall asleep, then I'm thinking about it. My pillow gets hot, and then I'm like,
sure.
oh shit, and then I have to turn my
Yeah.
pillow around to get the cold side.
100%.
And this goes on for like an hour, and then I start to count sheep.
Which has literally been proven to keep you up longer.
Well, yeah, I know. And you told me this.
Yeah.
Can you tell people this? Because I think
Yeah.
it's such an important, fascinating study.
So they literally used to tell people to count sheep, right, to help you fall asleep faster. They did a study. It actually makes you stay awake longer because all it's doing is drawing attention to the fact that you can't sleep. I think originally it was meant to take your attention off of that. But once you go into that practice, you're like, I do this when I can't sleep. And all you're thinking about is counting these sheep. How many sheep is it going to be before I fall asleep? And you stay awake longer. So anything that brings attention to the fact that you can't sleep is probably going to be a deterrent for actually getting good quality sleep. And that's why I recommend, like, don't spend time in that space if you're just ruminating about not being able to sleep.
Just get up and do something different.
Yeah, just get your mind off it. Even if you go in the other room and there's like a TV show that's relaxing, I know it's light and all that stuff, but that might be a one-off thing, right? So like a couple hours of sleep one night is way less impactful than all of a sudden associating your sacred place of sleep with anxiety and the feeling of being uneasy about sleeping.
So I'm gonna give you my number one sleep tip, okay? Sleep hack. Because I don't have a TV in my room, I told you, but that's more like logistics in terms of where to, don't ask with where to put it and all that stuff. Because we don't have walls, they're all like windows. It's a whole thing.
Tough life.
Yeah,
It's just so many windows and they're floor to ceiling, so I just can't.
that's not what my point is. So I use an iPad, right? Yeah. And I only use it when I really can't fall asleep because there are two. So my number one sleep hack, and there's two shows that just bring me joy if I watch them, and that's The Golden Girls.
Oh, wow.
And that's Frasier.
Okay.
And if I watch one of those shows, it brings me back nostalgic. Like it brings me back to like years ago when I was a young kid.
This is a great point, yeah.
And I just get happy. And I watch an episode, it brings me joy, and I fall asleep. And it takes away any angst of the day. And by the way, I want to give a shout out to Dave Rubin because I know Dave Rubin, that you're the same way with Golden Girls. We have this we bonded over this thing. Do you know who Dave Rubin is?
Yeah. I don't know him, but I know he is.
Okay. Well, anyway, I love him because you know who he is. He's a political guy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And he came on the podcast, and we had
how I saw him on. That's how I knew.
Oh, he's not on yet. He wasn't on yet. I mean, he was on, but I never aired it.
Though.
What?
Then you post a story or no?
I did. I did post a story about him. Yeah. Because he could understand it. So the truth of the matter is, like, if something brings you joy and happiness, it will help you fall asleep better. So
there's some actually good stuff on that now. So they did this study with the light, like blue light, right? There's an explosion of these blue light blocking glasses. And the data on its impact on sleep wasn't like strong correlation. It was relatively weak. Well, now some new stuff come out, and what they're realizing is really the more impactful thing is how intense your connection is with the content. So like if you're viewing something that's really emotional or really like invigorating to your brain that you're dialed into, that's going to be more impactful than the actual light, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
And there's also on the flip side, I would venture to say, and I think I'm in this bucket, like if there's something like Golden Girls that's relaxing and you associate with those positive emotion, I would bet that might be worth actually having the light. And when you think about routine, like you think about how embedded, how deep rooted those emotions are, that's more powerful than like a little bit of light in your eyes. I would venture to say. This is just going off of trying to piece things together, but I think when you look at the psychology of things, like psychology and just how you feel emotionally is usually a lot more powerful than any physical, reaction.
Totally. It puts you in a different headspace.
Which is really, like I said, that's the most important thing about sleep.
That's why when you said I smiled, because I think blue light, shmoo light. I think at the end of the day, if you're in a good headspace and you feel peaceful and joy and you calm's a big one, then you'll fall asleep much easier. So then let's talk about when you fall asleep, then staying asleep, because I think staying asleep can be a real problem for people. A lot of people can fall asleep easy, and then they're waking up like 2 hours later, and then that's when all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
So tell me about staying asleep, because I think a lot of people have that problem.
Yeah, I think a lot of people. Well, it's not abnormal to wake up in the middle of the night. So,
no, but I mean, like, not to go to bed, pee, whatever, but like
for sure. Well, so I think that's what you have to think about is, okay, first off, if you're waking up 4 or 5 times, that's not normal. And think about how many times and why you're waking up. So a lot of times sleep issues don't show up as sleep issues at all. It's really stress management. And if you're waking up worrying about the same thing over and over and over again, like that's a good indication you should probably talk to somebody about that, right? Like therapy is a great option, but like if there are issues and stressors in your life that are repetitively waking you up or keeping you up at night, that has nothing to do with your sleep. And then the other thing is
can you say that again? Because I think that's super important, right? People assume is that they have bad sleep hygiene, right? But yet it's actually something else in their life that's just kind of keeping them up that they have to address.
Yeah, it's like stress management. And they always mask each other. And I think that what's unfortunate is people think, I can't sleep, I can't go back to bed, I have a sleep problem. And then they go down the route of supplements and medication to address sleep, and they don't address the stressors in their life. But most of the time, like if you're fulfilled in what you're doing in life and you have great relationships, people tend to sleep a lot better, right?
I think that is such a great point. This is why I like you, because I think that a lot of other sleep people really scientifically talk about sleep at a scientific level, right? But what you're
Yeah.
doing is you're humanizing it into like actual like life, right?
Yeah.
Like why you would like why sleep is actually important for your well-being and like what actually other
Yeah.
things besides a cold room
Yeah.
keeps you asleep. Because I think that's a very good point. And then what happens is I've seen this so many times with my friends because I actually sleep okay most of the time. But when I do have something that's going on in my life and that keeps me up, and then I'm not sleeping, and it can also go on for too long. I think, oh my God, I'm not sleeping well. So then what you end up doing is you take the melatonin, or you
Yep.
take you think the magnesium. Or my friends, the ones who have really high stress, they take what do you call it? It's like a pharmaceutical. It's like a big one.
Ambien.
Ambien.
Yeah.
And then they can get addicted to Ambien, and it becomes a rabbit hole
Cycle.
of a horrible
Yeah.
cycle.
Yeah, and I think you have to look at, stress is like the kryptonite for sleep. And foundationally, just when we look at life as a whole and what causes stress, like if you don't have purpose in what you're doing every day and you don't have the right people around you, those two things, you're going to add significant amounts of stress to your life. So how do people expect to sleep well if the biggest things that create happiness in our life aren't in place? Mm-hmm. You're obviously going to have huge amounts of stress, and we know immediately you're going to be impacting sleep. So I think a lot of times, like hopefully when people think about having a sleep issue, why is that happening? What thoughts am I having? And peel back those layers. And a lot of times it's super foundational. And sometimes you might need to make a big change in your life. Maybe you're not around the right people, but it can be a really good, almost magnifying glass to reevaluating what you're doing. And I
Yeah.
think that's happened to me. There's been times where I didn't feel fulfilled and, I was kind of unsure, and I definitely wasn't sleeping as well. And why would you be when the foundational ingredients of happiness are out of whack?
Yeah. I think that's so true. People also turn to alcohol
Yeah.
or weed
Yeah.
to kind of help them
Which
fall
also
asleep.
makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
it does knock you out, right? Like it's sedating. So, on paper, you're like, oh, I fall asleep faster, and I wake up and I felt like I was knocked out. So you assume that it's better sleep, but it's the opposite.
So what happens with alcohol and sleep? What's the
Yeah,
the effects?
alcohol completely changes the architecture of sleep. So, it's sedating. So when you think about it, it makes sense people like it because you fall asleep faster. Same with THC, but you fall asleep faster. And what it's doing is it's just not really allowing your body to get into those REM cycles. And REM cycles are important for basically resetting our mind, resetting our emotional stability and our ability to reason without emotion, in a sense, reset our emotional intelligence. So if you're eliminating those REM cycles and you think about the reason people turn to alcohol, creates this cycle. You're not going to be able to reset from an emotional perspective, but when you have the alcohol, the majority of the first half of the night, you almost don't have any REM cycle, no REM cycles. And as your body is metabolizing this alcohol, when it's done doing that, it tries to make up for it. And you go into these like crazy deep or long REM cycles, and you wake up feeling like you're in this great sleep. But really all you're doing is bouncing around in these lighter stages of sleep, and you're actually waking up quite a bit. It's just for usually it's really short, so you don't even remember it. A lot of times people be like, oh, I didn't wake up one time. But if you actually look at what's going on in your brain, a lot of times it's very wakeful sleep, and it's just for a split second. But your brain really isn't having the chance to get into those cycles, those REM cycles that are so important for resetting every day.
What's worse for you, alcohol or THC for
Oh
sleeping?
man, it's interesting because like from a just looking at the two, like alcohol in regards to like cancer, causes 7 types of cancer. THC it hasn't been shown to do that at all. So I think just if you're looking at the two substances, alcohol is pretty horrible for you. But with sleep alone, if you isolate them, they kind of have some similar traits. They both affect those REM cycles. And THC is a little different because, again, it's sedating. They both are sedating. But it seems like the first couple nights, they might have a positive impact. You might have more deep sleep and have good quality of sleep. But then afterwards, when you're chronically using it, it goes the other direction. And you tend to not have as many REM cycles, and and creates this lighter stages of sleep. So it's kind of weird, but they almost do the same sort of thing. And I think a lot of times THC is associated with good sleep, but night after night, even though you're falling asleep faster, it doesn't mean the quality is where it should be. Anytime you're changing like the structure of your REM cycles and how our body like flows through that natural rhythm, usually not a great thing, right? Like our body likes to have these rhythms and have a reason how they adjust throughout the day. Same with like our circadian rhythm, how light affects things. Even our breathing is, it's a rhythm. And so our body tends to like to have control. And anytime those are thrown off, it's gonna show up somewhere else. It's gonna be impacted in some way.
So, by the way, do you do any of that stuff then? Because you're such a...
No, I drink from time to time, like I said, but I would say, I mean,
Does one glass of wine affect your sleep?
it does. But it depends when you have it. So I think what I've done over the years, just knowing how this is impacting sleep, is I think about like how much I'm going to have and when I'm going to have it. So, good tips with like if I'm going to have a glass of wine or two, having it before dinner as opposed to after dinner or with dinner makes a huge impact. It gives your body time to metabolize it. And then even like if you're going to have, let's say, a crazy night, right? A lot of times, there's not really a difference between 4 and 6 drinks as far as your experience if you slow it down a little bit or, cut it off towards the end of the night. But when you look at how it impacts your sleep and the long-term effects, if you eliminate a couple drinks, 10 times throughout the year, that's a huge difference. Mm-hmm. And so I think just bringing the awareness to it and just having a little intention between or about what you're doing makes a big difference. As soon as you know what it's doing, I think you rethink every time you order a new drink.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, just being cognizant of what you're doing.
Yeah.
What about caffeine then? Because I feel like caffeine, you can get your body acclimates to it. Like if I have coffee, like I do it now more habitually when I wake up, I'll have coffee. But if I drink coffee at like 5 or 6 o'clock, it doesn't really impact me at all. Or
does you think it does?
I was going to say, is that just what I think? What does it do to my body for sleep or for everything else?
I mean, caffeine's interesting because you feel it quick, right? Like so it peaks at like 45 minutes. But it stays with us for a long time. The half-life is 5-6 hours, which means, you're only metabolizing half in 6 hours. So a lot of times people are just having caffeine in their system all the time. If you have like 300 milligrams of caffeine, for example, spread throughout the morning, like between 8 and 2, mm-hmm. you'll have like 30 milligrams left the next morning, like 8 a.m.
Really?
Yeah, it really stays with you. What's crazy is like if you have an espresso martini, caffeine or alcohol will double the half-life of caffeine. It's almost like 10 to 12 hours. So I think that's like the trendiest drink right now,
It
so
is.
it's funny. People don't even realize like that. You want to impact your sleep, dial up an espresso martini. Red Bull vodka too, but I think if you have a Red Bull vodka, I think that's the effect that you want. But I think a lot of people are ordering espresso martini.
It is super popular right now. I noticed that too.
Like a lot of times you're in a nice restaurant, like they'll have decaf espresso, which is a way better option.
That's I think but people are not doing it for that.
I never trust it though. I'm always like,
decaf,
is it really decaf?
Does decaf also have caffeine in it a little bit?
It depends. Like, probably a little bit, but 200 milligrams, well, you're not going to have that much, but 100 milligrams in a shot of espresso is way different than maybe 15 with a decaf. They take a majority of it out.
I mean, how much caffeine do you allow yourself a day? Do you drink a lot?
Yeah, like probably 300 milligrams. But I try to really front load it. If I'm going to do it, it's like
in the morning,
8 a.m. Yeah.
How about other things that can help sleep? Like I know you're a massive sauna person.
Love it. Yeah.
Right?
Any heat.
Me too. I love heat.
Yeah, sauna is like it's a luxury. Most people can't have a sauna at their house, I would say, but any heat, like sauna has awesome health benefits, Alzheimer's, dementia, but for sleep, isolated sleep, it's really just about heating your body up and warming up your core temperature. So hot tub, bath, hot shower, all those are just as effective and they can be really useful.
Which is interesting because that's isn't that kind of like counter to what people say? Like you should be sleeping in a cold environment, but your body's core temperature should be higher with the sauna.
Well, so what it does is if you raise your core temperature, your body reacts. It like overcompensates, just like I need to cool myself down. So it starts to cool itself down. The other thing that happens is it dilates your blood vessels in your extremities, so your arms and your legs. So there's a rush of blood flow to your extremities, which cools your torso, your core down, and you're able to drop your temperature faster. So you go from like a really high body temperature, and then you go from that, this great blood flow, into a cool room, and you cool down super quickly and are able to fall asleep fast.
I like
So
that.
it's like a reverse reaction.
And I should tell people, like, by the way, you don't have to have an expensive sauna at your house,
No.
but there's all, I have this one here. I have like an indoor
Yeah.
portable one. Oh, I have one outside too. I have a big
I was
one
going
too.
to say, that's quite the combo.
I have a combo because I'll tell you why. I like this one because, shout out to Therasage because it's amazing. It's an infrared indoor sauna. It's like a little cake. It's like a little
pod.
area because I can keep my head out of it, and so it doesn't ruin my hair.
The hair.
Right, or my eyelashes when I have them.
Right.
So this just gets my body sweaty and sweating.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
like
a
little hat.
traditionalist. I go for the old school hot sauna.
I know. Well, you have like yours is like crazy. You have a barrel, right?
I have two. I have the new cabin by Sisu, and then I have the barrel.
What do you mean a cabin? What do you mean?
It's like a square that they just came out that has glass on the front. But that's what I shoot the podcast in because of the glass. You know, it has light. If I couldn't shoot it in the barrel because it's so dark.
Oh, that's so there you have that. So how hot does that one get?
Same 230. It rips.
Doesn't it? Can it like burn your brain or overheat your brain? I'm not even joking.
Yeah, you don't want to stay in like way too long.
Well, how long can you stay in that?
At 230, I mean, 10 minutes would be really, really hard. It's also, in that one, you're a little higher, so like, you know, heat rises. So if you're up a step, your whole body is in like the really hot air, as opposed to a barrel, you're on the ground. So it like 230 in a barrel is a little cooler than in like a cabin style.
Holy crap. You're
going to feel it one day in the podcast.
I know. What am I doing? So Todd actually started a podcast that basically he wants to torture people, literally torture people in the sauna. It's whoever can withstand every minute in that crazy sauna while you ask, rapid fire questions.
Yeah, it's beat the heat. And then, so it starts at 160, ends at 230. Every 5 minutes, it goes up 10 degrees. And so if you make it, you beat the heat. And then there's 5 like trivia questions.
How long did you say it was?
The max is 30 minutes.
So you're going to make people stay 30 minutes into that 230
Well, it
degree
starts
sauna.
at 160. It gradually gets hotter.
Okay, well, by the way, at 160, I'm hot.
That's a different heat, though. Infrared's a little different.
It is different. Can you explain the difference? I know you're not here for saunas, but I do think it's important to
so
mention.
infrared is basically heating up the molecules in your body, like some of the water molecules vibrating in your body. So it almost heats inside out. It takes time for that to happen and heat you up. Where traditional sauna, the air is much, much hotter. And so it almost heats you up from the outside in. They both take time, right? Because air doesn't transfer heat very well. It just doesn't. Like it's like, if you look at a thermos for the most part, there's usually air pockets in there or a vacuum because it doesn't transfer heat. So it takes time for your body to heat up. But in general, the same thing is happening. It's just the type of heat and mechanism, type of waves are essentially different. But the air temperature in a traditional sauna is much hotter. So it's weird. Like in traditional sauna, you walk in, you're like, it's hot, and you know exactly what you're getting into. Infrared sauna, it's kind of sneaky. You're like, you're like 10 minutes, in the first 10 minutes, you're like, this is nothing. I'm not even hot. And then it's like, all of a sudden you just start pouring sweat.
That's what happens to me.
Yeah, because it literally is heating you from the inside out. So, but like when you're getting heated traditionally, your skin is reactive to the sweat, so it happens quicker. So I think your body is almost like, slow to react because its temperature is rising without like the sensation of it being hot on your skin, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so isn't that better for you, the infrared?
It's never like, so we have some really awesome data on saunas, 40-year-long studies done in Finland. And that's really the gold standard in sauna studies we have. And so those were all done using traditional saunas. Now, that doesn't mean that infrared is not as good, but it just means right now, like if you had to place a bet on what's going to work, we know traditional saunas work. I think just on the mechanisms of an infrared sauna, I'm sure it has the same outcome. I would guess there's a lot of studies being done right now, but the one thing that the infrared's not as good for is if you do like contrast therapy, just for the experience, because it's like you said, it takes a while for you to heat up. So like if you go in really cold water and you think I'm going to run in infrared sauna and warm up, you're going to be cold for a minute.
That's 100% true. That's why it's really hard for me. Like I have my cold plunge out there, and
Yeah.
honestly, like doing that hot cold thing
No.
doesn't work with the sauna outside
No.
at all. It's like a joke. 'Cause
Like
I'm
you need
barely
like 20
hot.
minutes to heat up.
Oh, easy.
Yeah.
I mean, like for 30 minutes, I'm like, all right, I guess now I'll go into contrast. It's
Yeah.
like doesn't have the same effect in terms of just in terms of efficiency.
Yeah, like Remedy Place has like a contrast room you can rent
Yeah.
out, and they put an infrared sauna in there, and it's like I think you have like an hour and a half, and it's like if you do one sauna and then cold, and then by the time you warm up again, the hour and a half is over.
That's
Because you got to be in there for like an hour.
Well, I was gonna say if they have a room, like I think why don't they just put a sauna like one of those barrels in there?
For sure, they
instead?
should have. I think they probably would have if they
they
could go
knew.
back.
Well, yeah, because it's like I don't know. Like in fact, actually, the one I have outside for a while actually, because it takes so long to get to 170 where I actually feel it. I'm like sitting in there. I'm like, okay, like this is like it takes a long time.
I used to actually when I had an infrared. I mean, there's pros and cons. The benefit of an infrared too is a lot of times you don't need to connect it straight to your circuit breaker. Like it's a normal plug.
Okay.
So I used to have one because I had it on a balcony when I lived in a high rise, and I put like an extra heater inside, like a space heater, and the infrared because one, it takes a while to heat up, and two, like I do like the feeling of it being hot.
Me too.
So it takes a minute.
That's a good idea, though. Maybe I should put a space heater in mine
Yeah.
outside. That's a really good idea. When I want to ruin my hair, of course, but that's a whole other.
Well, not worth that.
It's not, definitely not. I only go in it. It sounds so crazy. If I know I'm going to be washing my hair, and any girl can relate. Like, maybe I'll do it the day before and that day. So it's like only so often I can really use it. That's why I love this indoor one.
Foundation of happiness is purpose, people, lashes, and hair.
And good hair.
So if you're biohacking interferes with any of those,
Then it's not. Then it's absolutely not good for your longevity.
Exactly.
100%.
Stress will be added.
100%. Okay, so magnesium versus melatonin for sleep. Is there anything that you want to tell us about
magnesium,
that?
I love magnesium.
Me too.
I like magnesium 3 and 8, like Momentous. That's what's in their sleep packs. But that was developed by some neuroscientists across the blood-brain barrier. So when you think about sleep and the brain and resetting, that's going to be the most impactful on the brain. There's a bunch of other forms of magnesium, but in general...
No, it's a good point because people always ask me, well, what about magnesium glycinate and this one and that one? What's the difference?
Yeah, it's net positive, right? Like all magnesium is useful. Some are more bioavailable. I specifically like the 3 and 8 version because I do tend to take it before bed, and it's a little more calming. I experience just because it's impactful on the brain. But I mean, blood work's always a great place to start too because there's quite a few people that are low in magnesium, and it impacts so many functions in our body. It's not just like sleep or being calm. It's across the board of super important molecules. So it's like I always tell people to start with blood work, right? And even if you feel awesome, like you need a baseline. And I think eventually, like a sleep study will be the new blood work because it's kind of the same thing. It's for me personally, I had moderate sleep apnea. I had no idea. Thought I slept great, and then I got a sleep study done and had moderate sleep apnea. And the only reason I got that done is because I felt so much better doing the mouth tape that I was like, why do I feel so much better? So I did one with the tape, one without the tape, and realized I had like full-blown moderate sleep apnea. The doctor would have recommended a CPAP, the whole deal.
Really?
And I did it with the tape, and it fixed everything. Like
how long
everything
did
was
it
perfect.
take?
That was only 2 nights of one, 2 nights of the other, back to back. One with the tape, one without.
Wow.
So I was taping for about a year before I did this study because I was like, all right, let's really see what's going on because it changed my life. I mean, I felt so much better when I started doing it. I didn't wake up as much. I slept deeper. I felt way better in the morning. And, I wasn't really positive what was going on. So eventually I tried to figure it out. And, it basically, I had this apnea going on and it was totally alleviated. Not, that's my experience. I'm not saying that's what you should do. But my point is, get a sleep study because you've only slept as yourself, right? Like you've never experienced what anyone else feels like in the morning. You don't know, like, and you're also sometimes not aware, like now if I don't use the tape, I'll wake up and my mouth is really dry. Well, I was always having that. I just was so used to having a dry mouth in the morning. It didn't even like dawn on me. And as a kid, I used to brush my teeth like a million times, like 3 times a day. Cause I always didn't want to get cavities, and I'd always have a cavity. And then looking back, it's probably just because my mouth was open all the time.
So you can get cavities from having an open mouth?
Yeah. So,
Why?
one of the big factors in breaking down the enamel of your teeth is the pH level and how acidic your mouth is. So, like water is like 7, that's like neutral-ish. And anytime it drops below 5.5, most dentists will say that's the acidity is really breaking down your teeth at a fast rate. And a lot of times when your mouth is open at night, it's in the 3s, like 3.6, 3.7 pH, super acidic just from having your mouth. So when you think about the microbiome of our gut, it really starts in our mouth. And that's all that bacteria is all being impacted by having an open mouth. And we're seeing more and more, a lot of dentists are on board with the mouth tape because, like the rate at which your teeth are getting broken down accelerates quite a bit.
Wow. I didn't even notice. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So there's so many other reasons to be using this mouth tape.
Yeah. I mean, jaw structure too. Like your bone structure takes shape of whatever you're doing. Our body's adaptable. So
Right.
when you
So
think
what
about,
does that mean then? If you
you think about your mouth, especially is prevalent in kids. They've done studies, but when your mouth is open, right, like
right?
it kind of creates a shape that's a less structured jaw. So if your mouth is shut, your jaw will slowly take shape of and replicate that position. The more and more you're in that position. So people tend to get a sharper jawline over time when they're nasal breathers.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I mean, there's really cool studies with kids because kids grow at such a fast rate. It almost like accelerates the data, if that makes sense. So you can see a big difference, and you can almost, once you start looking at people, you can kind of tell how people breathe based on like their jaw structure and.
So if you're more defined jawline,
Not everybody, obviously there's a lot of genetics, but yeah, it will definitely make a difference one way or the other over an extended period of time. Which
really?
makes sense. I think about anything you do, like think about your knees and hips. If like you're doing repetitive motion,
all the time, of course, it takes them.
It adapts. Your body adapts. It's the same thing. If you're in a position for 8 hours a night, it's going to adapt and make it easier for your body to be in that position.
So if you're like this,
yeah,
you won't have as much of a. I'm more vain, so I'm curious. I won't have as much of a structured jaw.
Yeah.
Okay, well, sign me up. Can you send me a lot of sleep tape? Does one pack, like one
a month,
sleep tape?
I mean, this is all you. This is the anti-aging formula.
I know. What are you trying to say, Todd? Do I need anti-aging?
No, but you're 20. You want to stay 20.
I know exactly. And by the way, anti-aging is like a terrible word. You should say pro-aging because we all want to age. What's the alternative to age?
Staying 20. That's what I want to do.
That's true. I do too. But like like I'd rather like keep on living than not.
We'll fix that on the packaging. But yeah, basically, a lot of, especially females, have skincare routines, and the tape is tough because it needs to be on a dry surface to stick well. So we put, collagen, biotin, vitamin E, vitamin D, aloe, stuff that moisturizes your skin. It's good for your skin in the adhesive. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. Also made in the U.S., only U.S. made.
Thank you. Thank you for pitching it and
Boom.
promoting it.
Got you.
How about sleeping positions? Does that affect your sleep?
Yeah, definitely. I think it depends on, the hard part is like everybody has different issues, so like if you have orthopedic issues, for example, like a shoulder, that's tough because the side sleeping seems to be, majority of people sleep on their side. It's also the least amount of snoring.
Wait, majority of people sleep on their side?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Not their stomach?
About 50%. Yeah.
50%?
Yeah.
How many sleep on their stomach versus back?
It's back is the least, and I think stomach is like 30. You're going to get different data, but about half is on their side.
So what are you going to say about that?
So, on it depends on like your lens, right? So it's like on your back from an orthopedic perspective is probably the best such anatomical position. Like it's very safe for your joints. On your side, from a breathing perspective, is pretty efficient. It's going to be less snoring, better for sleep apnea. But when you think about like your shoulder and your neck and stuff, there's kind of like a lot of room for issues. So I think it's, okay, what's your main goal, right? And then figuring out from there. But rule of thumb, like side sleeping is probably your best bet. One thing with the side sleeping though is like, I'm a big fan of like kind of like the squared off memory foam pillows because you want to make sure your neck is aligned, which can cause some issues, right? So if it's a rounded pillow, it's hard to really get the right height, and having a correct height pillow. So, really having that distance from your shoulder to your head being similar to your pillow height, right? Like my pillow height should be higher than your pillow height, right? Like if I had your pillow, my head would be tilted a little bit. So
how tall are you?
6'3".
This way.
Yeah.
Okay, what about, so you're saying sleeping on your side is probably the most beneficial.
Yep.
I've always heard that sleeping on your back is the most beneficial.
Like I said, it depends on your approach, but from a breathing perspective, that causes the most snoring. If someone has apnea, which, well, right now about 60% of people breathe out of their mouth. That's the studies coming out. So the chances they snore or have apnea are much higher if they're breathing out of their mouth. So I'm just saying in general, on your back, for a lot of people, causes their airway to be, in a more compromised position.
Interesting. So I sleep on my side, so that's interesting. What
I feel like back was always promoted because from your face getting puffy.
I was going to say, I
then
think
inflammation. Yeah.
I think it was more of a beauty thing
Yeah.
than
And-
anything else.
And females tend to do better with it because they have a lower chance of snoring and having apnea, just in general.
If
So
they're on their back.
just across the board.
Yeah, but
Men,
I
it's
think
much
it's
more
uncomfortable.
prevalent in men.
It's way more prevalent.
Yeah, I can't sleep on my back. I feel like I'm in a coffin or something. I'm just like
It's so
so
uncomfortable.
weird. I hurt my back, and for a while that was the only way I could sleep, and it was pretty torturous.
What happens if you wear a mouth guard? Can you wear a mouth guard with this tape? I guess
Yeah,
it's
we have
fine,
a lot
right?
of people that do that. Double it up. Yeah, because the mouth guard is kind of like some people have a hard. You can't really control your mouth when you're sleeping, so sometimes it moves around. So this can be useful to combine with it. Just
Because
to
I'm a
kinda keep it in place.
grinder. I'm sure you are
The tape
too.
is useful. We have a lot of people that message us that it helps with grinding, which that's like I wasn't 100% certain about because it doesn't really totally like make sense that it would fix it, but I'm talking I have hundreds of messages about that.
That it helps with the grinding?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
I think when I was asking you earlier about melatonin and magnesium, we talked about magnesium,
Yeah.
but I don't think you mentioned melatonin.
Yeah, melatonin's it's tricky, right? It's like it's wild. It's a hormone, right? So it's
Right.
produced in our body.
But how did melatonin become this idea that melatonin helps you sleep? Because I was like, for me, if it is a hormone, how does that
Well,
work?
it's like a triggering hormone, like our circadian rhythm. So throughout the evening, it's meant to, like with the absence of light, it's meant to ramp up throughout the evening to make us, fall asleep. But what's wild is like a lot in Europe and stuff, a lot of times you have to be prescribed it. A lot of countries,
I know.
It's a hormone. Like there's not a lot of hormones you can just grab over the counter. And the good thing is with it though, there's like not a ton of negative side effects from like taking it. I think that's why it's so readily available. But
Why not? Like, why is there, if it is a hormone,
yeah.
shouldn't there be side effects with it?
Yeah, the receptors, like the way it's absorbed, it's like when you have too much, it's not like it throws you all out of whack like a testosterone or estrogen. It just goes unused. But and some people are using like crazy amounts of it nowadays. But the reason I tend to shy away from it is not because of the results, more is the thought behind it. Because everybody wants a quick fix, right? And then all of a sudden you're dependent on this thing, and you think this thing is going to help your sleep, and then you're not doing all the behavior stuff to actually create a good environment. Like when you think about melatonin, most people can produce a great amount of melatonin if they just control the amount of light in the evening and create a routine that winds down and they stop stimulating their brain. But people don't want that. They want a quick fix, and they just go to like a pill or a supplement.
Right.
Like that's how we don't have a sleep supplement, is because I just don't love the idea behind the thought. Usually people just jump right to that instead of thinking about like, how are my stress levels? Like, what's my routine look like? What is my day-to-day nighttime routine? What am I eating? What time am I eating? All the things that can really impact sleep. They just want a quick fix.
And also, I guess with sleep tape, though, that's not really a quick fix, right? Because number one, you're not ingesting it. That's the first part.
Yeah, hopefully not. Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
But
That'd be weird.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it does, breathing is so powerful, and I think a lot of times people are turned off by breathing in general. They don't give enough time to actually like feel the difference. And so it's almost like bumpers too. It makes you nasal breathe. It makes you relax. And when people are stressed, that's just going to calm you down in general. A lot of people
Right.
feel really relaxing because it's the first time throughout the day they're probably breathing out of their nose. And so that calms you down. And yeah, it also does create a bit of a routine, right? Because you can't talk anymore.
Yeah.
And it kind of creates this subconscious, like once I put this on, I fall asleep. That's why we love masks too, because
Yes.
you can't be on your phone when you have a mask on. Especially for college teams, it's insane. People are just on their phone, Snapchat until they literally pass out with their phone. But then the sleep mask creates this routine. They don't even really realize what they're doing, but it creates this nighttime routine just because you can't get back on your phone.
Right. So like a couple good things is that's a great like circle back, right? Like terms of like ways that some ways that people could try to sleep better that we haven't heard before is
Yeah.
maybe trying the sleep mask
I love the sleep mask.
and the sleep tape.
Yeah, sleep masks are, I would say, underrated big time because the mask, people love blackout shades. I know we shouldn't have light, all this stuff, but you can't take that with you. The mask is cheap and you can literally replicate the environment anywhere you go. You go to a hotel, whatever you want to do. If you're an athlete and you go on the road, you have control. You took something that was uncontrollable and you made it controllable. So I love that. And the tape is awesome because I think just the breathing in general, when you calm down your breathing, because when you're breathing out of your nose, you're forced to calm down. You don't realize it, but our breath is like the steering wheel of our nervous system. And people don't realize how quickly it will calm your nervous system down and down-regulate it.
You know, it's also great. I just realized when you were talking and saying that, the sleep tape can probably be a really great mechanism for people with anxiety.
100%.
Like, forget about the sleep part.
Yeah.
Just putting that on your mouth because it will force you to breathe better.
Right. And when people have anxiety, it's hard to convince them, like, just breathe, like, do this
Yes,
protocol. That's hard.
exactly.
But if you just throw some tape on, even if you go for a walk, it's insane. Like, it's like this less, not invasive, that's not the right word. You don't have to be as intentional. And it just forces you to physiologically calm down. And you don't even have to think about what's happening. It just forces you to breathe in this calming way.
Will you send me some more of this?
Yeah, for sure.
How many come in this?
30 a month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
And you use this every night?
Yeah, I mean, I'm habitual. It was almost like self-serving. I mean, I created it for myself. And I was like, I know if I'm having this issue of not finding like a good one, that there must be a bunch of other people.
Wow. Okay, I have another question for you. Another myth or a non-myth. Like, is it true that everybody should get 8 hours of sleep?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
Okay.
the amount of people that can function off of 6 hours of sleep is less than 1% in the population. Yeah, optimally. And it's actually probably more. So they did this study last year is at Harvard in Japan, and it was a pretty cool study. The average age I think was 30. They took everyone, they let them get acclimated to having the ability you could sleep as long as you want. You could sleep up to 14 hours. So that's trying to find the optimal amount of sleep. So they brought them into the lab, they let them get acclimated for a few nights, and then they were like, sleep as long as you want. And the average was about 8.5 hours. So that's actually where it ended up being, which is more than thought. So it's, if you're someone that's like, I really need like 8, maybe even more, that's actually not weird. That's the norm when we look at it. But what was interesting was almost everyone in the study was getting over 7 hours of sleep when they came in. In the first few nights, most people slept 10 hours. So they were, even though they're sleeping over 7 hours, they were chronically underslept and their body was trying to make up for it. So that's a good like litmus test. Like if you ever go on vacation and kind of stress free and you can sleep as long as you want, if you're sleeping like 10 hours or you feel like you can sleep 10 hours, you're probably chronically underslept.
Wow. Well, I thought it was the opposite because I'm habitually used to waking up so early.
There's part of the circadian rhythm too.
I'll just wake up super early.
Which also happens. So there's some, you can poke some holes in that, but in general, if that's happening.
Well, because I'll tell you what happens. My kid for he's now 11 and another one is 9. For like, I don't know, 8 years of this kid's life, how I wake, he's my alarm clock. He comes into my room. He like basically lies on top of me and just basically terrorizes me.
Yeah.
And it's getting harder and harder because he's getting bigger. And so I'm so used to that happening at like 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
That like, even if I have like a night to myself or I'm on a holiday or whatever, I'm traveling for work, I'll still just pop my eyes open because I'm used to that behavior.
That rhythm.
Even though I am, by the way, I am underslept. Because I've conditioned myself to think that, oh yeah, as long as I got like 6.5 hours, at least I didn't get 4. But I'm exhausted.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing with that study is that they had they didn't know what time it was or couldn't see any light outside. So that has an impact too. Like if you start, your circadian rhythm is triggered by the light. So you take that out of the equation. But Yeah, if you're always tired, we got to do something about it.
I know. I mean, like, this is the thing, right?
You're
Like,
pretty high energy for being always tired. Maybe I don't want you to sleep
I
more.
know. I was
I don't know if I
gonna
want to be around for that.
see. I think that we all, I think people in general, what we do is we adapt to what we know, like to what our
Sure,
circumstances, right? Like,
definitely.
you don't know what you don't know, right? Like, all I know is that I get about 6.5 to 7 hours of sleep, which, I just kind of like, I don't like. For an example, like until you have something that's much better, you didn't know what you were missing,
Yeah.
right?
Also, ignorance is bliss with sleep sometimes. Some of the
Ignorance
people
is
that
bliss,
know
yeah.
the most about sleep sleep the worst because they think about it too much. So like if you're
Yeah.
sleeping well, like don't go down this rabbit hole of trying to figure it and do all this stuff. Like keep that positive association and if you can fall asleep fast, like keep doing your thing.
And also relationships, super important. If you have like personal relationships that are fulfilling and satiating. But whoops, sorry.
Yeah.
That's you.
Oh,
What?
at
Did you
least
hear
it's me.
yourself?
Yeah.
Sorry. Whoops.
One thing to point out with relationships though is like
Yeah.
that's a huge issue a lot of times in relationships is just waking each other up. So like memory foam mattress, easy fix. Like, if your partner's waking up 3 times and you're waking up 3 times, all of a sudden that's 6 times if you have a mattress that mounts you around. So having something that doesn't transfer force is a useful tool.
Oh, that's a great idea. So have a different, what kind of mattress do people use?
Any memory foam,
Memory foam
I
mattresses.
love memory foam mattresses because like I said, like I could bounce on my side of the bed and Katie wouldn't feel anything.
I'm writing that down.
Yeah.
That makes a big difference.
Huge difference.
How about, okay, and you also said something about a pillow. What kind of pillow?
I like a memory foam pillow too. That's
Yeah.
kind of personal preference, but I think the reason I like memory foam is because you can kind of create that squared off shape. So
Totally.
you think about your neck and your shoulder, you kind of want that filled in, and I'm a side sleeper, so if you're a side sleeper, you want that. If you happen to be a back sleeper and you breathe well, you don't want a very elevated pillow. You might do a down pillow because you don't want your neck forward. You want to have good posture.
What is the number one question that people ask you about sleep?
Number one question people ask: how many hours should they get? That's usually what I get.
Really?
No, it's usually the most open-ended question, like, what's the best way to fix my sleep? And I'm like, I'm not
Do you have
going
an
to
hour?
stand here that long. Yeah.
Okay, what is one question that what was one of the best questions that you've ever been asked about sleep hygiene that you were like, wow, you know what? That's actually a great piece of information I should share with people.
That's a great question. I mean, we covered a lot. I mean,
That's why I get paid the big bucks. Not.
a lot of people, the biggest issue people have is saying I wake up at a certain time in the middle of the night every single night. Like, why can't I fall back asleep? Again, referring to a sleep issue. And it's like, well, if you're checking your phone every time, you're creating anxiety just by checking the time. Like, eliminate that and you probably are going to have a much better situation. But I think like,
Oh yeah, people always talk about keeping your phone away from you in a different room when you're sleeping.
Yeah.
That would actually give me anxiety, to be honest, but that's neither here nor there.
yeah, that's great. But I honestly, like, I think if there's one overarching theme here, it's like all these things we're talking about that are physical things you can do for your sleep hold nothing to the psychology and the feelings associated with your bedroom and not overthinking sleep and feeling peaceful, feeling relaxed, and feeling like you're stress free. I think people attack all that other stuff first, and they're a disaster on the other side.
100%. How
And
about,
also vice versa, like you can't have a ton of stress throughout the day and then bang, turn it off and go to sleep.
what's your thoughts on like different foods that are good for sleep? Like, what would you say? Do people ask you that? Like, should I be having warm milk before I go to bed? Or
Yeah. Well, I'd ask them if it was the 1940s if they said
well,
that.
the reason, why I said that because my mother always talks about like you should have some more milk before you go to bed.
I mean, and
1940s.
really the good thing is like giving yourself.
Because she's
some time.
actually almost 80. That's
that
actually
makes sense.
perfect. Yeah.
But giving yourself like a time gap from like, if you're 3 hours before bed is great. Let yourself digest. And then the other thing that seems to be useful is just having like a low glycemic meal, meaning like a good combinations of proteins, fats, carbs. Like when you spike your blood sugar, I've seen with people like it creates almost this like reaction wave when you have like a ton of like sugar or something, and then tends to disrupt sleep more throughout the night. So low glycemic is usually a good path.
Okay, I'm no sleep expert, but I think that I do have an opinion on certain things that we just kind of talked about.
No.
I know, it's shocking.
First opinion right here.
I know,
Here we go.
I know. I'm such a meek person
Yeah.
normally. I think so much of this stuff, I mean, a lot of the stuff that's again, like don't want to repeat myself, but I think a lot of the stuff that you said was you take a different approach to sleep, which is what I really like about you. And I think a lot of this stuff is emotional, psychological stuff.
100%.
And so like people have to do a trial and error, like what works for you.
Yeah.
People can say to me all day, well, don't eat 3 hours before you go to sleep and don't have fruit because of the sugar, blah, blah, blah. But guess what? I like eating my apples before I go to bed, and it makes me feel good and it makes me feel comforted. So guess what? I'm going to eat my apple and then I'll fall asleep better knowing that my stomach is yummy and full versus feeling that I'm depriving myself and starving and going to bed with an empty stomach where I'm thinking all the time, I'll wake up at night and be like, I'm hungry, and I'll go downstairs and eat if I don't feel like I ate enough before. So like, I think a lot of this is know thyself. Know like what works for you. Try some things. Kind of like give yourself some grace, like look at your life in lots of different ways and see what is actually not working for you and why you're maybe staying up all night or not being able to fall asleep, and work on those things.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but a lot of these things in the wellness space is not rocket science.
No.
We try to make these things so much more complicated than it really is. We try to make sleep more complicated, nutrition more complicated, all of it more complicated, versus just like being a real person and just like looking at your life and being like, am I happy with my life? What do I like about my life? What do I don't like? What don't I like about my life? And like tweak it as you go, and not to be so hard on yourself. You'll be much happier in the long run.
Yeah. And if you have a poor night's sleep, you're here. You've survived many poor nights of sleep, and you're going to be fine. You're going to get through the next day, and you have another shot at it tomorrow night.
Exactly. Like I know that it's going to be like, oh, even in clips, like weight gain and bad sleep. Like you're not going to become morbidly obese by having a bad night's sleep. Will it be helpful to you if you're someone who's struggling with weight to try to get more sleep? Yes. So just like try to get like another hour or two of sleep, But guess what? That is not enough to like get you super fit also.
No.
It's just another thing that can help you, get, to
just greases the skids a little bit.
Exactly.
It allows you, it lubricates the situation a little bit.
Exactly. Both are those are correct.
But if you're even listening to this, you probably have enough awareness that you're probably doing the right things to get better sleep, and it just got to give it some time and give yourself some grace, and you'll get there. Sleep is one of those things where, like you said, it's psychological. So, like, you're not going to listen to this, implement 5 things, and then have an immediate fix.
No.
Your body has to get used to it. It takes time, and you start to, get the psychology and associating that with sleep, and you'll be in a good place. But yeah, grace is powerful, and sleep should be something that's stress and sleep should be nothing associated in your life. They should be the opposite side of the spectrum. You should be so excited to go to bed because that's the one place where you feel like everything kind of melts away.
Or because you're just tired and need to go to sleep.
I was going to say, we didn't talk about it, but I want to talk about a great sleep tool. There is so much truth to like wearing yourself out. Exercising, even like we just found out not too long ago, exercise is net positive. It used to even be like, don't exercise close to bedtime.
Oh, God, no.
All the new data that came out, it's all net positive for sleep. Now, different types of exercise affect our different sleep cycles and when we do it, whatever, but it's all net positive. So even if it's right before bed, you're better off moving than not doing anything.
There's no negative outcome that happens from working out or exercise. I am like literally a broken record when it comes to this, because whenever someone asks me a question, I just say exercise, work out. Like if you are mad, go exercise. If you're anxious, go exercise. If you are depressed, go exercise. Yep. If you need to like let out some steam, go exercise. Like it's actually like the best drug, antidepressant.
Oh, it's so good.
Than anything else.
You know what's crazy about sleep though, that a lot of people have problems sleeping. But when you think about health and wellness, exercise is hard, right? Like it's not easy,
yeah.
Right? Eating good is hard. Like a lot of this stuff is difficult. Sleep is like the most enjoyable thing of all these things. And everyone's so resistant to like jumping on board that sleep should be prioritized. And all these people, I'm like, why are we fighting the one thing that everyone likes?
I know. Well, I think it's because like, again, like sometimes they even say like the more energy you put on something or the more you ruminate about it. Like that's why even therapy can be problematic. There's a lot of research now on that, right? Because the more you ruminate on your own, right? The more you ruminate on your own problems, it actually gets you deeper down that rabbit hole and that black hole of angst and unhappiness.
Number one symptom of depression, is talking about your problems.
Say that again.
The number one symptom of depression is talking about your problems.
Exactly.
And I would say the number one issue or the number one symptom of a sleep problem is talking about how bad you sleep and thinking about it.
100%. I'm a big believer in that. And that's why when people like, I'm living in the mecca of therapy land here.
What did somebody tell me the other day? Like, do you go to therapy for life or do you live to go to therapy?
That is such a great thing. I will tell you, in LA, you live to go to therapy.
This person lived in LA too.
I'm from Canada. I come from a smaller town where, and also maybe it's the time we I'm like a latchkey kid. I grew up in like the 80s. Like I feel like we kind of just have to figure shit out.
And I think that's a lost art. And I think I was on the tail end of that like generation of like, I was still like, you didn't really talk about stuff, but you just press forward. But when you look at like all the data coming out, it's like, there is a huge advantage to just kind of figuring out your problems and emotion. And I think there's like the pendulum swung way far one way.
Too
far. We're going to come back to the middle, but I think you need to be able to work through things and figure things out. And it's okay that it's normal to feel anxious. Like when you care about something, you're going to be anxious. And that's a great feeling to have. There's a reason for it. But it's like, just because you feel a little uncomfortable doesn't mean there's a clinical issue going on.
Absolutely. That's the thing. Again, just because you feel uncomfortable does not mean it's a clinical issue. And that's what's happening, especially where I live in Los Angeles, New York, or anybody where the socioeconomic level is higher. It's like, oh, I have a problem. Maybe run to therapy. If I told you how much therapists charge here and like you can't even get in.
Yeah.
You cannot even get in to see a therapist around here. And if you do, you're paying like $400 for a 15-minute session. It is literally absurd to me.
Yeah.
And you can't even like make an appointment. And so to me, I feel like number one, the fact that like you're preying on people's discomfort is, I think, an awful thing. And no one's wanting to take insurance, which is a whole other podcast altogether. But the other thing is, I think this idea of running to therapy to try to figure out your problems or focusing on your problems too much, the sleep, the whatever the thing is part of the problem as well.
I agree. We'll have athletes that come to us and like before races, like I get super nervous and I can't, I'm kind of shaky. I'm like, yeah, like you care about it and you want to do well. That's a great feeling. Like you should be anxious. And I think like, it's a skill of almost, becoming comfortable with that feeling and adapting and like getting used to it and almost leveraging it for positive. Like some of that, like cortisol and anxiety is meant to give you energy. That's why it happens. It's like if a lion came after us, it's meant to give us energy to get away.
Yeah.
It's the same feeling of emotion in something in our life. It's like if you care about it and it's a big deal, you can leverage some of that like anxiety and some of that physiological response to actually propel you forward and then deal with it, whatever it is that's giving you that energy.
Yeah, 100%. It's what actually makes you want to do well.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
It's like there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
And now we've been conditioned to think that there's something wrong with it.
Yeah, if you're really trying to reach your potential, you should kind of feel a little anxious like all the time. There should be a little touch of like, can I pull this off? This is a lot to take on. This is pretty advantageous. Like I don't know if I can do all these things. And that's probably a sign that you're pushing yourself.
Yeah.
And it's like a healthy amount.
Because otherwise you're just stagnating and just kind of living in your comfort zone of good enough. Like, oh, I can do this, status quo.
Yeah.
Right? How do you know what you don't know of what you can do and what you can accomplish if you don't at least try to make an attempt at it?
Right. And that's really, you want to talk about not being happy. That's the absence of happiness. When you really have no feelings of being uncomfortable and like you're pushing yourself and you're overwhelmed and it's just coasting.
100% agree with you. Well, this was fun. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Maybe we can do this
I've been trying
again.
to be cool enough for a long time.
I know.
I've been working on it.
You
made
made
it.
it.
Step my game up.
You've become
I even
cool
wore
enough.
nicer clothes, so I tried to step my game up.
I know you got dressed up.
I usually wear gym clothes like 99% of the time.
Really? So you did this for me?
I did.
Wow. I should be very flattered, and I am. That's very nice. You look very gentlemanly and very professional.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thank you. Bye.